How are you doing? I'm Kevin, aka Abducted. We're in my home studio with GearWire.com, and I'm going to start to take you guys through a little bit of how I would go about making a remix. Move over to my computer. I create all kinds of music. I create remixes and produce for some bands, and I play all kinds of instruments. So what really inspires any given song is really what I would say is what decides where I start as far as writing something. If I hear a melody in my head, I may start with programming a melody from a synth. Sometimes I'm just tapping on something and I feel like working with the beat, and that's where I start. I start with either programming a drum beat or maybe a drum sample and doing some cutting and pasting with it. Sometimes it's a groove of a bass or whatever it is, whatever I decide to start from. Remixes in particular, typically you're starting with inspiration from someone else's song or someone else's idea or something like that. In this particular instance, if we move over to the computer, I started with, as I mentioned, Don Penn's No No No, which is typically, I want to say 85, 86 BPM, something like that track. It's a slower dancehall track, and we wanted to take that up to, looks like we're working at about 130 BPMs on this song. So obviously some drastic time stretching had to occur in order for that to happen. So when you're working with an audio sample of someone else's song, you're remixing it, the most important thing to do when you're clipping that sample is to make sure that you have a perfect loop. By perfect loop, I mean something where the drums line up with the beat at the set tempo that you're working at as precisely as possible. So that's really probably, as far as editing goes, where I spend the most of my time, and it's really where you need to be the most precise. It's important that it's EQ'd well, and there's a lot of things that go into making a song sound good, but if your drums don't line up when you're putting programmed drums on top of sampled drums, nothing's ever really going to sound right. It's going to sound messy. First thing you need to do is clip your sample. We zoom into here. We'll go ahead and set a loop again. Oh, I need to turn off the effects that I was running on that. Sorry about that. You can typically see when you zoom into your sample, if you look at it and watch the waveform, you can see the beginning of your bass drum notes and your snare hits. Okay, so you can see right here's my snare hit. It's lining up pretty stinking close to that second beat right there. Here's my next snare hit. It's maybe, well, it peaks right here, but you can see the attack is right about there. So it's really lined up right on the beat, and if we listen to the loop, you're not going to hear any kind of lag at the beginning or the end of the loop, hopefully. Let's check out my work. Pretty smooth, it just hooked back around again. And a good way you can always check and make sure is layer a programmed beat on top of it. Sounds like we got a pretty good loop there. I guarantee I spent a good deal of time making sure that that was right. And like I said, depending on how many samples you're taking from a song, typically on a remix, that's where I'm going to spend the most of my time. Once you have that clipped up, really at that point you're dealing with arrangement from there and any kind of additional parts that you're adding in. I actually added a guitar part into this remix. Played over the original a little bit. I added famous funky drummer break over it, so you can always throw other samples on top of your stuff too. And we chopped up Don Penn's vocal. a good deal. Added in a bass line. And that's how we turned a dancehall track into a dance track.